Elementary, my dear Watson. Robert Downey Jr. and Jude Law return once again, playing the titular character Sherlock Holmes and his partner, Dr. John Watson, as they take on Professor James Moriarty. I gotta say this first. I love Robert Downey Jr. I feel that ever since Iron Man, he is just putting out hit after hit. And like that role, I feel that this is definitely one he was born to play. I just feel he's perfect, the way he's always so cool and calculating, but at the same time he can be charismatic. Well, then he can also be pretentious, but at the same time you also find him likable. It just all melds together so well. Not to mention he has these amazing powers of observation, deduction, and foresight. It just almost makes him seem superhuman the way he always able to see everything around him and take note of all that, and that's how he figures things out. And that's something I really like about this sequel because it actually shows him figuring it out. It shows how he's able to pull this stuff off. It shows what he's seeing as he does it or after it actually occurs, how he managed to do everything. And it's really interesting, and I really like the style in which it was done. Another thing that I really liked is that they added a new layer to his character because, unlike the first film, where he was always on top of things, could always figure everything out and see it ahead of time, in this one they actually allow him to make mistakes. He screws up, and it just goes to show that he's human. He can make mistakes like anyone else, and that adds a new sense of realism to his character. Yet still, he doesn't dwell on this. He doesn't let it get him down or depressed. He just merely accepts it and moves on because he knows that he has a job to do. And that just goes to show how strong-willed Holmes's character is, because he doesn't let things get him down. He doesn't get depressed. He keeps thinking. He plans ahead, and he doesn't let interferences get in the way of things. He has one problem, he finds a way around it. I think a special thanks should definitely go to the script writers because they just nail it dead on. And Robert Downey Jr., he just sells his performance perfectly. But of course, what would Holmes be without his partner, Dr. John Watson? Again, like Robert Downey Jr., I find Jude Law is just perfectly cast in this role, as he serves to kind of counterbalance Holmes's personality, which is pretty extreme, whereas Watson is more down to earth. At the same time, he's not just Holmes's sidekick. He literally feels like a colleague, a companion, a necessity to his missions. I didn't quite get that so much in the first one, as he seemed to just be there as Holmes needed him. Don't get me wrong, he was still a big part of that one, but he didn't really seem to be as integral a character. Fortunately, that all changes here. He appears to have inherited some of Holmes's skills of deduction as well, and I feel that makes him even more of an asset to Holmes. It's made painfully clear to Holmes that Watson is definitely the most important person in his life, because he can't always do it alone. Sometimes he really needs Watson's help, and he definitely comes through for him in this one. But I think I've said enough about the two leads, so let's see how the supporting characters hold up. I'd like to begin with Sherlock's brother, Mycroft Holmes, played by the also very talented Stephen Fry. Now, according to my research, Mycroft is supposed to possess skills of deductive reasoning that surpass even those of his younger brother. Unfortunately, he's also very lazy and just doesn't have the motivation nor the physical prowess to carry out these missions as Sherlock does. Either way, I still find that Fry gave a stellar performance at portraying this character, and he really made him feel like one of the more memorable characters, despite not having a whole lot of screen time. Regardless, nearly all of his scenes really stand out in the film, and he's just so charismatic in his delivery that you just gotta like him somehow, and there is one scene in particular that reveals a lot about him. The one problem I have with this character is that, well, I definitely got the lazy vibe. I really didn't see him as being more brilliant than Sherlock. Oh, sure, we see him deducing things, observing things, and sometimes even acting a little condescending to his brother. He even calls him Shirley at some points. But at the same time, I don't really see him do anything that outmatched Holmes. Sherlock always seemed to be so much more into it than Mycroft. But that could also be chalked up to the fact that he's more physically willing to put himself through these missions. I give much credit to Fry nonetheless. So now let's talk about our main villain, Professor James Moriarty, played by Jared Harris. Now this is a role that clearly took a lot of skill and time to master, and Harris pulls it off brilliantly. He's a master planner and strategist, a super intelligent mind, and he's basically proves himself to be Holmes's equal in terms of deductive reasoning and foresight. Hell, the two of them end up engaging in a battle of wits over a game of chess, and that actually proves to me more intense than some of the action scenes. Now that is impressive. It also helps that the role is incredibly well written, but Harris's delivery just really nails it for me. Granted, I still have a problem with this character. He doesn't really stand out as a particularly remarkable figure. I mean, on a mental note, definitely, but physically he doesn't really do anything that solidified it for me. I found myself comparing him to Mark Strong's character from the first one, who was basically supposed to be a magician, capable of achieving these things that others found impossible. They had no idea how he was able to do this. And that was the kind of character who was intimidating. That's the kind of guy you don't want to mess with. Granted, it could be argued that he was more of a conventional villain, which, yeah, he kind of was, but at the same time, he still had something that set him apart from others, because he was really able to pull off a lot of serious stuff, and you knew that he meant business. I just never really got that with Moriarty. He just didn't intimidate me. One exception being a scene later in the film where he proves that he can actually match Holmes's powers of foresight, but that only lasts like a minute or so. An excellent performance nonetheless. So let's see how the women in this film held up. For those of you who enjoyed Rachel McAdams' character, Irene Adler, in the first film, I'm sorry to say that her role is seriously reduced in this one. She's not all that integral, so enjoy her scenes while they last, because she really doesn't have all that big a role this time around. Instead, the female lead this time around is Madame Simsa, a fortune teller played by Numi Rapis. While I feel she played her part well and definitely had some good chemistry with the two leads, she wasn't really all that memorable a character. She didn't do anything too significant, so that's kind of a shame, but she's still a good actress, and her character is enjoyable for what she is. There's also Kelly Riley, who plays Watson's new wife, who I believe was also in the first film. However, she doesn't really do all that much. She proves competent, but at the same time, she doesn't get in on a lot of the action, so, I can't really say all that much about her. Aside from the characters, another thing I really enjoyed was the use of slow-mo during the parts where Holmes was calculating things, where he was using his powers of foresight to deduce how he was going to pull everything off, or the action sequences, how they were very stylized. We see bullets flying through trees and blowing things up, and it all looks great on screen. What's also nice is the fact that you don't necessarily need to see the first film in order to understand this one. The story pretty much holds up on its own. Nevertheless, I would still recommend seeing the first one, as that really introduces you more to the world and the characters they live in, plus a couple of relationships, maybe a little more clear, but still, this one holds up on its own. And that about sums up everything I have to say. Now keep in mind this is PG-13, so the young children may want to stay away, and it's 2 hours, 9 minutes long. A very solid length for a movie like this. So with that, I have to give this a final score of 9 out of 10. Awesome. If you're a fan of the first one, I think you'll definitely be enjoying this one at least as much. I'll see you later. Peace.